Be the envy of the neighborhood. 860 KKAT, where the grass is always greener. Welcome to Gardening Utah. Here's composter and show hoster, Jana Francis.
Welcome to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis. Every week here on Gardening Utah, we give you gardening inspiration and advice from experts across the state. We talk about vegetables, flowers, trees, shrubs, and of course, your lawn. Thank you for listening. I hope this show is something that you'll look forward to checking in with every week. Whether you're a beginner or an expert, Gardening Utah aims to inspire you and keep you in the know of what tasks you should be accomplishing in your yard and meet amazing, informative experts along the way. This show airs on the radio on the weekends here in Utah at 10 a.m. on 860 AM KKAT, and episodes drop every weekend on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, so hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. On today's show, I'm going to reduce all of your anxiety about your lawn right now. If you're like me, you are really nervous and stressed out about this drought and how you can maintain your lawn without being a complete selfish fool and really be water wise, but also enjoy the landscape that you've worked so hard to create. So we are going to have Eric Marble with Chanshare Sod Farms on the show today, and we're going to talk all about it. He's going to tell us how we can have a green yard while staying water-wise, especially in a drought. He has such amazing advice for us. I can't wait to get into it. Some really logical tips and tricks. And if you want to be an amazing water warrior, then he is going to tell us exactly how we can safely brown out our lawns and what we can do to bring them back. And I think it's going to be really informational, maybe educational for some of you, and I'm really excited to get into it. But first, we have the tip of the week, and we're going to talk about my very favorite flower, which, as many of you know, is iris. Tall, bearded, beautiful iris, named after the Greek goddess of the rainbow. It's one of the oldest garden flowers. For many of us, it probably reminds us of our grandmothers, and that's one of the reasons that I love mine. In fact, some of them in my yard are from my grandmother's original home. And in spring, those irises are one of the very first hardy things to unfurl their buds and give us that kaleidoscope of beauty that's reliable for several weeks. And they are so hardy. They're easy to grow. They're reliable. Their deer don't like to eat them. And by golly, they're drought tolerant. And they attract butterflies and hummingbirds, and they make beautiful cut flower bouquets, especially to take on around Memorial Day to the cemetery and those kinds of things. And they're just amazing perennials that flourish, but they do need to be divided. So let's talk about that.
860 KKAT. With your Gardening Utah tip of the week.
My tip of the week is when and how to divide iris. Now, first of all, it's important to know which irises you're looking to divide, and specifically my instructions today are about the bearded iris. So, as irises mature, it's important to remember that the rhizome produces more rhizomes. Now, what is a rhizome? The rhizome is the base of the plant. It's that sideways growing stem that shoot out laterally just beneath the surface of the soil. And each one of those new shoots begin to form new roots and shoots of its own. Now, the rhizome is used by the plant for food storage. Other plants that are rhizomatic like iris are things like ginger, turmeric, and even canna are all well-known rhizomes. And since these rhizomes produce more rhizomes year to year, when bloom production slows, it's about every 3 to 5 years, and it is really necessary to divide those rhizomes by removing and replanting the small rhizomes. And it is important to divide at the right time of year, although I will say iris are incredibly hardy plants. So you're going to want to wait for about 3 weeks, sometime in mid-July to late July, all the way through September, probably no later than September, is the best time to transplant iris. You definitely want to avoid dividing them during the winter because they are just trying to survive on the stored energy in their rhizomes. So, First of all, you carefully remove the entire clump that you're looking to dig up with a spade or a garden fork. And be careful because remember, those rhizomes, those roots go very, very deep and you really want them attached. So try not to cut the roots underneath the rhizome when you dig up the iris. So then once you've got that entire clump up, and you will be amazed at how far those roots can spread, you just want to divide those rhizomes by pulling them apart with your hands. Sometimes if I've got a clump that's really entangled and stuck together, I will pick it up and just drop it. And a lot of times the rhizomes just start to break off at a joint. And really, once you get down there on your hands and knees, you can kind of tell exactly where they need to be separated. Sometimes you need a sharp knife or shears to make any cuts necessary. So a good rhizome should be about as thick as your thumb, and it should have healthy roots and 1 to 2 leaf fans. Now, about the leaves, by the way, what I like to do with the leaves, I put my thumb and my pinky, I separate them, and I put the thumb at the base of the rhizome, and then I put my pinky up as high as I can, and then I cut in a V shape about 6 inches up, and just make sort of a V shape out of the leaf blades. And that really helps reduce stress in the plant because you really want the iris to concentrate on growing new roots when you replant them and not maintaining those leaves. Now you're going to want to really inspect the rhizomes. Anything that might be soft, anything that might look like a borer, you're going to want to throw that away for sure. But Utah really doesn't have some of the problems that other areas do with iris because we are in a more dry of a climate. Now, once you've got your iris clumps separated, you've got your fans cut into a V shape. I like to give mine a good wash with the hose to really inspect the rhizomes a little bit further, get out any insects or pests that you may notice, and really look at those rhizomes. Now, once you have your healthy iris all ready to go and you're going to replant them, I like to dig shallow holes about 10 inches wide and about 4 inches deep. And you're going to want to put a small amount of soil in the center of that planting hole so that you can center that rhizome on top of the soil mound and spread those roots on either side of the rhizome. And then fill that hole with soil, give it a good watering, but you want to make sure that the surface of the rhizome is just visible at the soil surface, because that is a really common mistake people make, is they will plant irises too deep, assuming maybe it's more like daffodils or tulips where you want those deep in the ground. You do not. You want that rhizome to be getting sun. And I also like to make sure that that rhizome is facing the angle where it's going to be getting the most sun, because iris really only bloom when they have a really good amount of sunshine. So then you're going to want to give it a good watering, tamp the soil really firmly because you want to anchor that rhizome in the ground. You're also going to want good circulation. I prefer to plant them all with a fan kind of facing the same way just to make it look nice. And I like to either plant them in a clump, like in groups of like 3 or 5, making sure those leaves face the same direction. Or sometimes I'll do a row. It kind of depends on the color. And I have so many that I do lots of different things with them. So let your imagination run wild and have some fun. Now listen, you know, I talk a lot about mulch on this show, but do not mulch your rhizomes. Don't mulch your iris because mulching retains moisture, and too much moisture can cause the rhizomes to rot. Not meaning that you can't mulch around the iris, but just leave a big space away from the rhizomes, at least initially, to make sure that they are going to be getting some direct sun and they are on top of the ground.
And that's your Gardening Utah tip of the week, brought to you by The Advocates. If you're in an accident, you deserve an advocate. Call 801-355-5550 or visit UtahAdvocates.com. Never miss a tip for your garden and never miss an episode. The Gardening Utah Podcast with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT.
I hope you had a drink every time I said the word rhizome in that segment. Holy smokes, that was a lot of information. But listen, you really want to make sure that you have those iris established before 4 to 6 weeks before the end of the season. So it's time to get after it in the summer. And also I want to make a note, do not cut down the leaves unless you divide them, because leaves carry on photosynthesis for next year's growth. So don't trim your iris leaves until the fall unless you're dividing them, of course, and only snip back those brown tips to make them look better, and cut that flowering stalk back to the ground at a slant to discourage rot. And we'll be right back with Eric Marble from Chanshare Sod Farms. Stay with us.
She's more than just gardening puns and sage advice. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT. Gardening Utah, available wherever you get your podcasts and at 860kkat.com/garden. Here's Jana Francis.
Welcome back to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis. And we've got Eric Marble with Chanshare Sod Farms with me. Eric, thanks so much for coming to be on the show at such last minute notice.
Oh, dude, I totally love this. And you know what? I start thinking about water and I start thinking about lawns, and I really could go on all day long. You guys would find me very boring because I would just drone on about all this stuff.
Well, I always find it so fun to talk with you because one of the main pet peeves that I've always had, and it was really a driving force for me to even start this show in the first place, was water conservation. It's really one of my passions on, education and learning more and more. And a lot of this I learned from good old Larry Sagers and listening to him always, harp on water conservation as well. And just really very good lawn practices. And, you've been on 2 episodes last year, which are some of our most listened to episodes that we've had. So we just get such good information from you. And it's fun for me to be able to help educate Utah by giving such good advice. And so I'm just happy that you're here and you have such good info for us. And we want to talk about, you said, ways to stay green while conserving water in a drought. And what better timing than now with our dire situation, right?
Oh, yeah. Like we're seeing so much in the news about this topic right now. And there are so many little practical things that an individual can do in order to conserve water in their lawns and their landscapes and inside their house even. And every gallon that's saved is a gallon that remains in our reservoirs, right? And then that gives us insurance against further years if we're having a drought that continues. So it's pretty awesome, and you mentioned before about just how important it is to conserve. In Utah, the average homeowner puts 50 inches of supplemental water on their landscape in a year, and they only need 24. And that's to stay a verdant green if you're maintaining your lawn with correct water saving maintenance practices. So it is so important. And again, I keep thinking about this, and I would just hope that everybody that listens to this podcast takes just one thing and decides to do at least one thing. Because again, 1 gallon, it's like a penny saved, a penny earned. A gallon saved is a gallon saved.
Yeah.
So all of us doing just a little thing, taking a few minutes out of our day in order to do one of these principles or follow one of these principles is going to have a huge effect on how much water we have in the reservoirs going forward. So,
absolutely. Well, so what are some of your tips on staying green while conserving water?
Well, it's the first thing is to start today because, you've heard the adage of the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It really is. If you want shade, you can't plant a tree today and have shade today.
Yeah.
And so building a water-wise lawn is something which actually takes a little bit of time, but you need to start today. And even if you've already started building a water-wise lawn, there are things that you can do in order to decrease the amount of water that your lawn's going to take. And so, we're going into the summer months right now, which makes it a little bit harder for us to affect the root growth and the blade growth of your lawn because of the growing cycle of cool season grasses. But everything that you do now is going to affect things later. And so it's important to start today. So the things that we talk about right now, you may not see an immediate benefit from them. But I promise you that if you follow these maintenance practices, that you're going to create a water-wise lawn that is it's healthy and it stays verdant green through the summer without having to use a ton of extra water. So let's talk a little bit about just how you water. A lot of people get really worried because their lawn isn't the dark green. And so the first thing that they do is they put water on it more frequently. And that's just not necessary. Lawns are lazy. And so like they're only going to grow their root system as deep as they need to in order to get the water. So if you're watering frequently, if you're watering every day, that water only goes on the top inch or so of the soil. And so your lawn doesn't actually have to push its roots down deep into the soil in order to chase that. And so the first tip is to make sure that you're watering deeper. And when you water deeper, you water for a longer time, but less frequently. So right now, Governor Cox has asked everybody in Utah, he said that the government entities should only be watering 2 times a week. He's mandated that. And that should be more than sufficient if you're watering correctly in order to keep a green lawn. So for residential homeowners, we recommend that you put 1 inch of water a week on your lawn in the heat of the summer. Break that up into 2 cycles. So just water 2 days a week. And actually not days a week, but nights a week, because you never want to water in the heat of the day. So your best watering times are going to be between 6 p.m. and 10 a.m. because the temperatures are cooler, there's less evaporation, and there's more of a chance of that water getting down deeper into the soil. So the further that you put water into the soil, the greater or more healthy root system you're going to have, which will then be able to pull from a larger water table in the middle of the summer. And that will help you to maintain a green lawn without actually having to put excess water on your lawn. So that's the first tip. Make sure that you water deep, long, and less frequently. And the next tip is to grow your lawn taller. If you're mowing your lawn any less than 2 inches, then you're probably putting your lawn into amounts of shock. And especially in the heat of the summer, that shock can cause it to brown up quicker and to need more water and fertilization in order to remain healthy. So make sure that you're not mowing any less than 2 inches on your lawn. And we recommend 3 inches, as much as 3 inches. I know it's longer and some people don't like that look, but it's actually more healthy. And plus it promotes, again, that deeper root growth. And if the roots are further down into the soil, then it can pull from a deeper water table.
Yeah, and I feel like it shades the root system too.
Definitely. The soil temperature, the top of that soil temperature doesn't get as high because it has the shade. And so, yeah, definitely. Tell me about your chickens again. We were talking about your chickens before, and you were talking about how the lawn helped your chickens.
Yeah. So, I mean, keeping chickens alive in this ridiculous amount of sudden heat wave that normally doesn't happen in June, it's like a full-time job because, they just, anything over 90 degrees is really, really tough on chickens in particular. I mean, on all of our pets and wildlife, especially when it's out of the blue. They were just overheating where they were. And I'm really sensitive to making sure they're always feeling amazing because I'm one of those chicken moms. So in the afternoon, I have to bring them into the shaded part of the yard. And part of that is a grassed area. And that's the only place that I can keep them that they cool down is on the grass. It's easier on their feet. It's cooler on their feet. And then I notice that they just literally will lay down and kind of spread out sideways a little bit because the grass is cooling their body.
Yeah. I see in the news sometimes where people talk about, well, should we rip out lawns? Should we take that stuff out? And there's so many unintended consequences that we don't think about when we talk along those lines. And what you were talking about is one of them. A lawn has so many different positive benefits, including it decreases the ambient temperature around a home. So if you've got a lawn around a home or green space around a home, that's actually preventing the heat from reflecting onto your home. It absorbs the heat a lot better. And so because of that, you don't have to use as much energy and thereby water to cool your home because you've got a green space around it. Another thing to think about is a 2,000 square foot lawn will provide enough oxygen for 4 adults daily. So the oxygen content, it actually cleans the air because it takes the carbon dioxide in and uses that as part of its growth process. And then it emits oxygen. So again, those green spaces are super important for us to maintain and to make sure that we have so that we've got clean air, we've got cooler temperatures, and that our homes aren't using as much energy to do those types of things.
Yeah, I noticed such a huge difference. I mean, I've got a front porch that's in the heat of the day, it's so hot I can't even go out on it. But out back where the grass is, it's amazing, right?
Yeah, it definitely has a great effect on there. So, yeah, and heat and temperature, like that affects your lawn a lot. So in Utah, we have cool season grasses. We have to have cool season grasses because it has to go through a winter period and then also the hot period in the summer. And in order for it to be able to survive in those, it has a different growth cycle. So cool season grasses, they will increase their growth in the spring, both their root growth and their blade growth. It hits its peak in the middle of the spring. And then when temperatures get over 85 degrees, the root and blade growth slow dramatically. So the middle of the summer, that's why it's important. Like if you've got a lawn that doesn't have a deep root system, the middle of the summer is when it's gonna struggle the most, because those 85-degree temperatures are basically kind of the threshold for your lawn to continue growing. So the middle of the summer is really the point where, like, we'll talk in a little bit about browning out your grass. Yeah. About browning out your lawn and kind of the requirements for that. But the middle of the summer is really important it's an important time to realize that, if you've done all these things and you've prepared before, then you're not going to need as much water. So the middle of the summer, the blade and root growth slows dramatically. And then when those temperatures stop hitting 85 degrees and go below that threshold, then there's another burst of root and blade growth that comes. And so you need to kind of realize that and tailor your watering and your maintenance practices to accommodate for that.
Gotcha. So, I mean, the elephant in the room, obviously, we keep hearing a lot about, hey, brown lawns are cool. Let's stop watering entirely. And I know a lot of households have made the decision to do that. So when we come back from this break, let's walk through, if you do choose to do that, how to do it properly and to make sure that you can get that lawn back when it's ready to go. So we'll be right back after this on Gardening Utah. Stay with us.
860 KKAT with Jana Francis and Gardening Utah, where it's always mulch time. She really does have the nicest yard on the block. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT.
Welcome back to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis, with Eric Marble with Chanshare Sod Farms, and we're talking about the drought and your lawn. Eric, thanks again for being here.
So glad to do it. I love talking about lawns. I love talking about water.
I know. And water conservation is such a hot button for me, as I talked about earlier. So this is like, having this conversation is like the whole reason why I do what I do here in Gardening Utah. So love it when you come here. And this time right now is something I haven't seen in a long time, where people are highly considering browning out their lawns, and some households have decided to stop watering entirely for a while. And so let's talk through that, the pros, the cons, and how, if you do choose to do that, how to do it safely so that we can get our lawns to come back when the time is right.
Yeah, and as we mentioned before, like, it's not 100% necessary for you to brown out your lawn. Like, if you have maintained good, healthy lawn practices, you'll be able to conserve water in the middle of the summer and your lawn will still be able to be green. However, if you want to be a conservation warrior, then you can brown out your lawn. Now, cool season grasses are super resilient, and one of their defense mechanisms is to be able to survive without having much input and be able to come back from that after they've gone through a period of dormancy and actually continue to grow and continue to be green. And that's why cool season grasses in Utah are awesome. And that's why we're actually able to conserve a super large amount of water by browning out our lawns. And so, but it's important that you do that the right way. And there's a couple tips that I'll talk to you about. But before we talk about browning out the lawn, I need to warn you about a couple different things. Like, if you decide to let your lawn go dormant and brown out your lawn, you do not want to fertilize it before you brown out your lawn. Okay, because fertilization, what it does is it promotes that root and blade, the root and blade growth. And so you don't want to be giving it the mixed signals of, you're supposed to grow. And by the way, I'm not going to give you any water, because that would be really, really bad. So you have to wait for about a month after you have fertilized your lawn to brown it out. Okay. Now, as I mentioned before, when a cool season grass starts seeing temperatures over 85 degrees, it stops the root and the blade growth. And so if you want to brown out your lawn, that's the optimal time to do it. Now, I know here in Utah, like last week, we hit 100-degree temperatures and 90-degree temperatures, which were unseasonably hot. Usually it's about August that we hit those temperatures. And so like the heat of the summer, between 4 to 6 weeks, browning out your lawn is appropriate. Okay. So here's how you do it. Number one, again, you do not put fertilizer on it within a month of when you're going to brown it out. Okay. A cool season grass needs only about a ½ inch a month in order to stay alive. So if you're getting any rain during that period of time or whatever, then you usually don't have to worry about that. But again, in the middle of it, like a ½ inch at most in that month will keep it alive to the point where it can come back lush and green when the temperatures drop and when everything gets more of a normal temperature. The key to browning out a lawn is being consistent. I had somebody explain this to me or give me the analogy of, sometimes with people, a defense mechanism when they're injured is that they'll put them into an induced coma. And then they'll let their body heal from the induced coma. And then after that, they bring them out of the coma and then they're able to be more healthy. And that's kind of what happens when a lawn goes dormant, is it's kind of like in a comatose state. So it doesn't have any of the functioning that goes in with growing the plant or the roots or maintaining the structure in it. And then when it comes out of that dormancy, it can return to its regular properties without having any problems. Now, you would never put somebody into a coma and then bring them out of a coma and put them back into a coma and bring them out of a coma. That's just not healthy. That's not a good way to promote somebody's recovery. And so the key to all this is to be consistent. Like, you don't want to start browning out your lawn and then after a couple of weeks decide, oh, you know what, I'm going to make it green. And then, oh, we haven't had any rain, so I'm not going to water for a while. And you don't want to bring it in and out of dormancy. So dormancy will last a period of 4 to 6 weeks, is what you should shoot for. And again, you need to make sure that it has no more than ½ inch of water, right about a ½ inch of water through that 4 to 6 week period. And what will happen is your lawn will turn completely brown, but as long as the crowns of the lawn are not dead, then it will return and it can be a verdant green by the end of the spring. So basically, you stop watering, you stop putting any kind of fertilizer or anything on it. You definitely don't want to mow during that period either, because again, if you tear off part of the plant, it's going to want to regrow that part of the plant. And if it doesn't have the inputs, the water, the air, the nutrients, and all that, then you're not going to be able to do to keep it healthy that way. And another thing to be careful of is when you're browning out your lawn, you want to still make sure that you're taking care of it. So if you see any weeds that start growing in the lawn, make sure that you're eradicating those weeds. And the best way to do that when your lawn is dormant is to weed by hand. I know that it takes longer, but you don't want to put pesticides or herbicides on there when the lawn is dormant, because it affects the ease of it coming out of that dormancy stage.
That makes so much sense. It's almost a way to maybe catch all that dang morning glory.
Oh my gosh. Morning glory. It's the bane of my existence.
I agree. Oh, it's the worst. Okay. So you really do, when you have your lawn, if you decide to have it go dormant, you basically ignore everything but the weeds.
Yeah, basically. And again, you're going to want to watch it. It will go completely brown, but that doesn't mean that it's dead. But yeah, don't consistently water it. Don't put any kind of fertilizer on it. Don't mow it. Just watch for weeds and make sure that those are taken care of.
Yeah. Okay. And then after that 6-week mark, then how do you start bringing it back?
So once you're done with the 6-week mark, you want to just basically start watering it again. Water it for about a week and then apply fertilizer to it. The fertilizer gives it the nutrients that it needs to bounce back.
Okay.
And you want to apply a fertilizer that is high in nitrogen because the nitrogen will help it green up. And also, if you found one that had iron added to it, that helps it green up as well. So at the end of those 4 to 6 weeks, you just start watering. Again, right now, you try to put 1/2 inch 2 times a week and bring it out by watering deeply and making sure that all that water is going down into the water table, not running off or anything. And then don't mow it again until it's come out of that dormancy stage. If it's about, like if you see green shoots in there, make sure that they're growing and standing up before you mow it again, because you want to let that plant regenerate itself and have enough structure in it so that once you take off part of the plant, it has the root system and the structure so that it can continue to grow and continue to produce everything needed in order to be a healthy lawn.
And we're primarily talking about Kentucky blue here, correct?
Well, Kentucky blue, any kind of cool season grass. So cool season grasses are rye, Kentucky blue, some turf type tall fescues. Like warm season grasses are more like zoysia, St. Augustine. Those are the types of grasses that you would see further down in the state, like in St. George and stuff. Uh-huh. But up here in the northern part of the state, rye, Kentucky bluegrass, turf type tall fescues, like those are primarily, and probably about 95% of the lawns that are in Utah, in northern Utah, are that Kentucky bluegrass. Yes. And so, yeah, if you have just regular fescue, then it may struggle a little bit more to come out of that. And if you have warm season grasses, then you maintain them differently. But yeah, what we're talking about is the cool season grasses that we get in the northern part of Utah rather than the southern part.
Yeah, because my old house, I had planted a bonsai fescue lawn. Mm. And in the house I'm in now, it's Kentucky blue. But I wonder about the other house, if bonsai fescue would have the same brownout period.
Yeah, I mean, fescues are generally a little bit more tolerant of having less water on them. The Kentucky bluegrass definitely is able to rebound quicker and easier out of that. And so that's why Kentucky bluegrass is preferred in the state, because of the fact that it does well coming out of the dormancy of winter. And then with the drought conditions, if you brown it out, if it goes a prolonged period of time without any water, it can bounce back a lot quicker than some of the other types of turf.
Got it. Okay, well, we'll be back with more after this. We're going to talk a little bit about local scapes. So we'll be back after this right here on Gardening Utah. Stick around.
She's more than just gardening puns and sage advice. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT. 860 KKAT with more of the fastest growing show on radio. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis.
Welcome back to Gardening Utah. I am Jana Francis with Eric Marble from Chanshare Sod Farms, and we're just giving you the inside scoop on exactly what we should and shouldn't be doing to our lawns in a drought, depending on what you choose. And Eric, there's a philosophy called local scapes. We've actually had Cynthia be on the show a couple times, most recently episode 43, listeners. So you can go back to episode 43 and listen to a full explanation recap on exactly what local scapes is. But Eric, let's talk about more specifically with lawns and local scapes.
Yeah, you know what? Like, local scapes is awesome, and Cynthia B has been amazing at creating and promoting that. And basically what it is local scapes talks about creating landscapes that are suited towards your locale and to your lifestyle, and making sure that everything's functional in those landscapes. When you're looking at a picture, if it was all one color, you probably wouldn't be very interested in that picture. But if you're looking at a picture of a sunset and you see purple and blue and yellow and green and all that, then it makes it brilliant. And the same thing happens with our landscapes. If you've got only lawn in your landscapes, then it really doesn't make it beautiful and interesting, and it makes it just not as functional either. And so localscapes principles are basically going through, taking a look at your landscape, finding out which areas of your landscape are most well suited for which types of plants, and especially with lawn. Sides of houses, park strips, odd shapes, those are things that make it difficult to efficiently water a lawn. So if you have created a landscape where primarily you have lawn all the way around it, you may want to just take a look at that and decide whether that's functional or not. The sides of houses, you can put in paths, and generally the sides of houses are more narrow, which makes it harder to water those efficiently. And so if you create a pathway from your front yard to your backyard, that's a way for you to make it so that it's more functional and more efficient. And same thing with if your lawn is in an odd shape, that sometimes can make it more difficult for you to efficiently irrigate that lawn. And so creating lawns that have one big open space that is functional, that you can use for your pets, like your chickens or your dogs, or if you got kids in the house, obviously you're going to want to have more play areas. And so figuring out whether all of your lawn is functional or not. If it's not, then find out a different way to create beauty and create levels and make it a landscape that is just well suited for our climate and for our area. So, lawns are part of that. Sitting areas are part of that. Pathways are part of that. Park strips, all of those things are areas that you can take a look at and figure out the most efficient way for you to plant plants in those, and then also to irrigate those plants so that you're not wasting water. So, and again, we're talking about the drought, and I want to just kind of go back to something that I've talked about a little bit before. All of Utah's reservoirs have a 2-year storage of water in them. We're coming up on 2 years of not having very much water. And so that's why we're all of a sudden into the beginning of a drought cycle where things are so dire. The water table in our soil, the soil moisture, has decreased quite a bit. And when that happens, and then we get rain, before any of that rain can go into our reservoirs, it has to fill up the water table in our soil first. And so that's why it's so important for us right now to figure out different ways for us to conserve water. Maintaining a water-wise lawn is part of that. And as we've talked about before in some of the earlier podcasts, if you maintain your lawn correctly, you can maintain it and have it water-wise and not waste water. And most people can actually decrease their watering by 50%. And still have a beautiful green lawn. And as I mentioned before, if you want to be a conservation warrior, think about browning out your lawn, letting it go dormant. You can do that for a period of 4 to 6 weeks. Again, the optimal time to do that would probably be somewhere towards the end of July, starting towards the end of July and going through August on that. But that's a way for you to really make a huge effect. And every gallon that we save is a gallon that remains in our reservoirs. So it's important to make sure that you're just finding ways to decrease that water use inside and outside the house, and being able to protect your way of life as well, and be able to use your functional landscapes is just a beautiful way to do that.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things I love about localscapes is it really it makes you focus on how you're going to utilize your yard and think really logically around, do I really need to, gone are the days of oh, here's my vinyl fence and here's my square yard, and now I'm just going to dig my trenches for my sprinklers and lay sod all the way to the fence, and that's just such a waste. And it's not even energy efficient in a way, depending on the size of your yard, of course. I mean, obviously there are exceptions to that, but you want to get some trees in there if you can be a little bit away from the house so you can start that shade. Like you mentioned earlier, the best time to plant a tree is 10 years ago. And I have a feeling that more and more over time, we're going to need more trees, obviously, to shade our homes, to conserve energy. Yeah, I just think it's a fantastic principle. And it basically is a happy medium where you can have everything, right?
Yeah, definitely. I've seen in the news a little bit lately that people have discussed, well, should we be more like Nevada and have laws that kind of control our landscapes and our landscaping? And we are so different than Nevada. Southern Utah has a different climate than Northern Utah even. And so, you can have a beautiful landscape that includes lawn and includes flowers and trees and everything like that, and still conserve water. In Northern Utah, the way that we receive our water, the way that we actually get water is a lot different than in Nevada. They have to pipe most of their water in, and yet the topography in Utah is different. And so the delivery of water is different and it's easier. And we are in a more arid climate, but we still have, the benefits of having greenscapes around us. And, we've talked before about some of those benefits being like oxygen production and ambient heat temperatures. Those are all mitigated by having greenscapes around us, and even water that returns to the aquifers underground. Like if they filter through like greenscapes, that actually takes out a lot of the pollutants that could end up in some of our groundwater. So like there's so many benefits to having greenscapes, and as long as we continue to use water-wise principles to maintain those greenscapes, then we're going to be able to have this beautiful green and colorful landscape and in our residences and around our cities without having to decrease the amount of water that is available for us to continue to grow in our state and everything.
Absolutely. Well, Eric, listen, I would love to have you back for the next episode because I feel like there is so many things that we can still cover on if you do choose to have a waterways lawn and you do choose to reduce your watering by 50%. Let's have you back on the next episode to really go through step by step. What do you need to do? What not to do and what to do to really maintain a waterwise lawn so that we can have the best of the best and feel good about what we're doing and providing our lawn what it needs to be healthy, but without wasting water. So I'd love to have you back for episode 52 if you would.
Most definitely. I would love to do that.
Fantastic. And speaking of future episodes, Gardening Utah listeners, we are also going to have in the next few episodes, we are going to have Liz Hamilton. We are going to be talking about bugs. We're going to go over all the pests that you need to be watching out for, from squash bugs to earwigs and grasshoppers, you name it. We're going to go through all the little garden pests and what you can and can't do about them. I'm also going to have Mike Lorenk, the garden horticulturist at Jordan Valley Water Conservancy. Can't wait to have him on the show. So, Eric, thanks so much for being here today and helping us Utahns understand how we can stay green while conserving water in a drought, and look forward to having you back on the next episode.
Thank you, Jana. I really enjoy it.
When you're ready to grow big or go home, make your neighbors green with envy. Get the Gardening in Utah podcast, Gardening Utah, available wherever you get your podcasts and at 860kkat.com/garden.